Paul Vario was probably one of the most frightening people I've ever been around. He had an aura of menace about him that was quite remarkable, but the Paul Sorvino characterization didn't pick it up at all.
In Goodfellas, Paul Vario was played by Paul Sorvino. The portrayal was of a brooding fatherly figure. In reality, Vario was capable of acts of brutal violence.
Paul Vario, a notorious American mobster, was a key figure in the infamous Lucchese crime family. Born on July 10, 1914, in New York City, he grew up in the gritty Old Mill section of South Brooklyn. From a young age, Vario showed a rebellious streak. At just 11 years old, he was sentenced to 7 months in juvenile detention for truancy. This marked the beginning of a life steeped in crime and violence. Vario rose through the ranks of organized crime to become a caporegime, commanding a powerful crew of mobsters operating out of Brooklyn. His influence extended far beyond his immediate circle, making him a pivotal figure in the underworld. However, his criminal empire began to crumble in the 1980s, following the explosive testimony of Henry Hill, a former associate who turned government witness. Vario was convicted in 1984 on charges of fraud and sentenced to 4 years in prison. A year later, he faced another conviction for extortion, resulting in an additional 10-year prison sentence. Vario's personal life was as tumultuous as his criminal career. He and his first wife, Vita, had 3 sons, Peter, Paul Jr., and Leonard. But their marriage eventually ended in divorce. He later remarried Phyllis, with whom he shared a stormy relationship. Known for his violent temper, one infamous incident occurred when a maitre d'hotel spilled wine on Phyllis's dress and attempted to clean it with a dirty rag. Furious, Vario struck the man and later ordered a brutal attack on the restaurant staff after hours. Vario's notoriety extended to popular culture when Paul Sorvino portrayed him as Paul Cicero in Martin Scorsese's acclaimed film, Goodfellas. Despite his criminal success, Vario's life ended in tragedy. He died of respiratory failure in prison on May 3, 1988, leaving behind a legacy as one of the most feared and complex figures in the history of organized crime. On July 20, 1973, Leonard Vario, the son of notorious mobster Paul Vario, tragically passed away from severe burns at Wyckoff Heights Medical Center in Brooklyn. The exact circumstances surrounding Leonard's fatal injuries remained a mystery. Emotions ran high at his funeral, leading to violent clashes where mourners assaulted 2 television cameramen and a police detective. This incident was a chilling glimpse into the volatile world that surrounded Paul Vario and his associates. Decades earlier, in 1937, Vario's criminal activities had already begun to surface. A 16-year-old girl from Howard Beach identified him and Anthony Romano as the men who assaulted her. Their convictions for rape led to 10-year prison sentences. Vario's time behind bars was tumultuous. Despite being paroled twice, he was returned to prison for violating the terms, including arrests for burglary and dealing in stolen goods. He eventually secured his release in 1962. Following his release, Vario solidified his position within the Lucchese crime family. Operating from a German bar on Flatlands Avenue and a junkyard on Avenue D in Canarsie, Brooklyn, he orchestrated a range of criminal enterprises, from hijackings and loan sharking to bookmaking and fencing stolen property. His junkyard became the hub of these illicit operations. Vario quickly rose through the ranks to become a caporegime, leading a powerful crew within the Lucchese family. His influence extended to criminal activities at John F. Kennedy Airport, where his associates extorted money from shippers and airlines to ensure labor peace. Among his most infamous crew members were Thomas DeSimone and Henry Hill, figures who would later become synonymous with the inner workings of organized crime. Over the next several years, Paul Vario steadily expanded his criminal empire, solidifying his position as a key figure in organized crime. Following the death of mobster Jake Colombo in 1965, Vario swiftly assumed control over Colombo's lucrative illegal gambling operations in the Cedarhurst and Inwood neighborhoods of Long Island. Later that same year, Vario and 8 associates were arrested by Long Island authorities and charged with running a gambling ring. By February 1966, federal charges followed, accusing Vario of failing to obtain a federal gambling stamp. Undeterred, Vario continued his operations, and in June 1966, he and 17 others were apprehended by Nassau County officials for their involvement in an extensive bookmaking scheme. Vario's reach extended beyond the underworld. He maintained several legitimate businesses, including a flower shop, a bar, a restaurant, and a taxi stand. However, one of his most infamous ventures was Vario's Bargain Auto Parts Inc., located at 5702 Avenue D, which served as a front for many of his illicit dealings. At the height of his operations, Vario reportedly amassed a staggering $25,000 daily from his illegal enterprises. According to Henry Hill, one of his close associates, Vario once revealed that he had hidden $1 million in a single vault for safekeeping. Vario's influence wasn't limited to his financial endeavors. He also served as an unofficial consigliere to Lucchese crime family boss Carmine Tramunti during this era. However, his criminal activities occasionally landed him in trouble with the law. In 1970, he was cited for contempt of court and served a 7-month sentence at Nassau County Correctional Facility. A year later, in 1971, Vario orchestrated the purchase of Gefkin's bar and property through his associate Peter Abbinanti, securing the deal for $40,000 and further expanding his network of legitimate and illicit operations. On April 7, 1972, law enforcement intensified their investigation into Paul Vario by planting a hidden electronic listening device inside his trailer at a Canarsie junkyard. This marked the beginning of a covert operation aimed at collecting incriminating evidence against the notorious mobster. To further the investigation, an undercover detective equipped with a recording device frequented the trailer, posing as a corrupt officer. Vario, believing the detective to be compromised, began offering him bribes, unaware that his actions were being documented. The surveillance, which lasted 6 months, culminated in October 1972, when police conducted a high-profile raid on Vario's junkyard. Shortly afterward, on November 1, 1972, Vario faced an indictment for witness tampering. Authorities alleged that he had advised Frank Heitman, a gambler with prior convictions, to flee to Florida to avoid testifying before a Nassau County grand jury. Vario's arrest was dramatic. Police pursued him for 20 minutes through the streets of Brooklyn before he surrendered. By November 21, 1972, Vario was again indicted, this time for an elaborate insurance fraud scheme. He and his accomplices had reportedly stripped a boat of its equipment, sunk it, and filed a $7,000 insurance claim. In early December 1972, Vario faced additional charges for attempting to bribe the undercover officer. That same month, he pleaded guilty to a separate charge of drunk driving and was placed on probation. However, by early 1973, he had violated the terms of his probation and was incarcerated by February. His legal troubles continued to mount, and on February 9, 1973, Vario was convicted of tax evasion. Less than 2 months later, on April 6, 1973, he received a 6-year federal prison sentence for the tax evasion conviction, marking a significant blow to his criminal empire. Paul Vario, a prominent figure in the Lucchese crime family, was sent to the federal prison in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where he became part of the notorious Mafia Row, a section infamous for housing high-ranking mobsters. After serving his time, Vario was released in 1975. However, during his incarceration, the Lucchese crime family underwent a leadership shift, and the new boss, Anthony Corallo, replaced Vario as underboss with Salvatore Santoro. Following his release, Vario relocated to a residence near Miami, Florida, marking a new chapter in his life. In 1978, while on parole, Vario played a pivotal role in orchestrating one of the most infamous heists in American history, the Lufthansa robbery at JFK Airport. The plan, which involved stealing millions in cash and jewelry, was pitched to him over the phone while he was in Florida. Despite being geographically removed, Vario swiftly approved the scheme, stipulating that Jimmy Burke, who was incarcerated at the time, oversee the operation. The heist, executed in December 1978, became legendary after the crew successfully made off with an estimated $5 million in cash and $875,000 in jewelry, values equivalent to approximately $27.4 million in 2023. Vario's criminal activities eventually caught up with him. On February 9, 1984, he was convicted of defrauding the federal government. The conviction was bolstered by testimony from Henry Hill, a former associate turned government witness, who revealed that Vario had fabricated a restaurant job for him to secure Hill's release from federal prison. On April 3, 1984, Vario was sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and fined $10,000, marking the beginning of his legal downfall. On February 21st, 1985, while already serving time in prison, Paul Vario faced fresh legal troubles when he was indicted for his involvement in a racketeering conspiracy centered on extortion. Authorities charged Vario and his co-conspirators with a scheme to extort more than $350,000 from air cargo companies operating out of JFK Airport. These businesses were reportedly threatened with labor disputes and disruptions if they refused to pay. The case relied heavily on the testimony of Henry Hill, a former associate turned government witness. Vario was convicted once again and received an additional 10-year prison sentence for the extortion charges. His life behind bars came to an end on May 3, 1988, when he passed away at the age of 73 due to respiratory failure caused by lung cancer. At the time of his death, he was incarcerated at the Federal Correctional Institution in Fort Worth, Texas. Vario's final resting place is St. John's Cemetery in Middle Village, Queens, New York, where his legacy as a notorious figure in organized crime is cemented in history. Vario played a key role in orchestrating one of the most infamous heists in American history, the 1978 Lufthansa heist at John F. Kennedy Airport, where thieves stole over $5 million in cash and jewelry. While he wasn't directly involved in the robbery, his crew managed and benefited from the operation, showcasing his ability to leverage opportunities and maintain plausible deniability. Vario mentored individuals who would later become prominent figures in organized crime, such as Henry Hill, whose life was chronicled in the book Wise Guy by Nicholas Pileggi, and later adapted into the film Goodfellas. Hill's account highlighted Vario's influence and his pivotal role in the criminal activities that defined the era. Despite his success, Vario's legacy was tarnished by betrayal and legal troubles. His association with Henry Hill ultimately led to his downfall, as Hill became an informant and provided testimony that implicated Vario and others in numerous crimes. Vario was convicted of racketeering in the 1980s and died in prison in 1988. Vario represented a transitional figure in Mafia history, embodying the old-school code of honor while adapting to the modern challenges of law enforcement and internal betrayal. His ability to navigate these changes left a lasting impression on organized crime, influencing how future generations approached leadership and secrecy within the Mafia. Paul Vario's legacy remains a testament to the power and vulnerability of organized crime, illustrating both its allure and its inherent instability. His story continues to captivate the public, offering a glimpse into the complex and dangerous world of the American Mafia.